those who have been to a ruined wedding, what happened? Story 1. Man, let me tell you about this one wedding I attended that turned into an absolute circus. Picture this: beautiful outdoor ceremony by the lake, sun shining, birds chirping, the whole idyllic setting. The bride Emily looked stunning in her flowing white dress, and the groom, Mark, was all smiles in his sharp tuxedo. It should have been perfect, right? Everything was going smoothly until the reception. They decided to have a petting zoo as part of the festivities because they thought it would be a hit with the kids. And it was at first. Little goats, rabbits, even a pony, all fenced in nicely. The chaos began when one of the groomsmen, slightly tipsy, thought it would be hilarious to let the animals out. He opened the gate, and suddenly the reception turned into a scene from Jumanji. The goats bolted towards the buffet, munching on the salad bar. The rabbits were darting under tables, causing guests to jump up and scream. And the pony? The pony decided it wanted to be the star of the dance. Amidst the screaming and the laughter, I saw Emily and Mark trying to round up the animal. Emily's dress was now covered in goat hoof prints and grass stains, and Mark had bunny fur all over his tuck. Then, as if on cue, it started to rain. Not just a drizzle, but a full-on down. Guests were running for cover, slipping in the mud that quickly formed. Mark tried to keep the mood light. "Well, at least it's memorable," he shouted, laughing. Emily, bless her heart, was trying to smile, but looked like she was on the verge of tears. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, the DJ's equipment shorted out from the rain. No music, no lights. The best man trying to salvage the night grabbed an acoustic guitar and started playing some impromptu tunes. It was a valiant effort, but the damage was done. The evening ended with everyone huddling under the small tents, sharing umbrellas and eating soggy cake. Emily and Mark were drenched but held each other close, laughing at the absurdity. It was a disaster, but sometimes those make the best stories. Story 2. All right, so this next one happened to my cousin Sarah. She was marrying this guy, Jake, who was a bit of a mama's boy, but no one really thought much of. The wedding was set to be this grand affair in a fancy hotel ballroom. Everything was going according to plan until we hit the reception. Sarah's mom, a control freak, had planned every detail, but Jake's mom, Karen, was a whole different level of crazy. She was furious that she didn't get a say in the wedding plans and decided to take matters into her own hands. During the reception, Karen got up to give an impromptu speech. She started off nice enough, but then she began airing all sorts of grievances. "I just want everyone to know," she said, "that I had nothing to do with these decorations. If I had, it wouldn't look like a funeral in here." You could hear the gasps from the guests. Sarah's face went white, and Jake just stood there, stunned. But Karen wasn't done. She started critiquing the food, the music, even Sarah's dress. "If Jake had listened to me," she said, "he would have married someone who knows how to plan a proper wedding." At this point, Sarah was in tears. Jake finally snapped out of his daze and tried to take the mic away, but Karen held on tight, causing a bit of a tug of war. Finally, the best man, also Jake's brother, stepped in and managed to wrestle the mic away. "Sorry, folks, that's enough from Karen," he said, trying to... The damage, though, was done. The mood was shattered, and the rest of the night was painfully awkward. Sarah and Jake ended up eloping to get away from the family drama. I guess in the end, Karen got what she wanted. She wasn't involved in their new wedding plans at all. Story 3. This one time, I went to a wedding where the groom's ex-girlfriend showed up uninvited. Yeah, it was as bad as it sounds. The ceremony was beautiful, right up until the point where the officiant asked if anyone had any objections. Cue the ex, Laura, standing up dramatically from the back row. "I object!" she screamed. The crowd turned to see this woman in a bright red dress, mascara already running down her face. The bride, Lisa, looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole, and the groom, Tom, just stood there, mouth agape. Laura started ranting about how Tom had promised her they'd get married someday, how he was the love of her life, and how she was convinced Lisa had stolen him from her. The groomsmen were trying to usher her out, but she wasn't having it. "You can't silence me!" she yelled, struggling against them. The officiant tried to regain control. "Let's all calm down," he said, but no one was calm. Finally, Tom walked over to Laura and, in a move that surprised everyone, hugged her. He whispered something to her, and she slowly calmed down and let the groomsmen lead her away. Tom returned to the altar, took a deep breath, and apologized to Lisa. "I'm so sorry," he said. "Let's get married." Lisa, to her credit, managed to smile and nodded. They finished the ceremony, but the reception was tense. Everyone was on edge, expecting Laura to make another dramatic entrance, but thankfully she didn't. That wedding is still talked about in our family. Lisa and Tom are still together, though, and they laugh about it now. But man, that was one heck of a scene. Story 4, so.
I have this friend, Mike, whose wedding turned into a literal food fight. No joke. Mike and his bride, Jenna, were having this beautiful outdoor reception at a vineyard. Everything was picturesque. The decorations, the sunset, the twinkling lights. It was perfect, until the cake cutting. Mike and Jenna, being the playful couple they are, decided to smear a little cake on each other's faces. Everyone laughed. It was all in good fun.
But then, Mike's best man, Steve, thought it would be hilarious to throw a piece of cake at Jenna's maid of honor, Katie. Katie, not one to back down, grabbed a handful of cake and lobbed it right back at Steve. And just like that, all hell broke loose. Guests started grabbing anything they could: cake, cupcakes, even hors d'oeuvres. The elegant vineyard reception turned into a full-blown food. I remember ducking behind a table, laughing my head off while trying to avoid getting hit by flying pastry. The staff was running around, trying to control the chaos, but it was too... People were slipping on frosting, wine was spilled everywhere, and Jenna's dress was covered in every color of the rainbow. In the midst of the madness, Mike and Jenna were just laughing, enjoying the ridiculousness. Eventually, the fight died down, and everyone was left in varying states of messy. The vineyard owners were not happy, to say the least, but Mike and Jenna ended up paying extra for the cleanup and damage. Despite the disaster, or maybe because of it, it was one of the most memorable weddings I've ever been to. Mike and Jenna took it in stride, and their marriage is just as fun and chaotic as their wedding day was. Story 5. I attended a wedding once where the bride, Melissa, had this grand idea to surprise her groom, Jake, with a choreographed dance night. She'd been practicing for months with her bridesmaids, keeping it a secret from everyone. The plan was to perform it right after their first dance. The reception was in full swing when the DJ announced a special surprise. Melissa and her bridesmaids took the floor, ready to wow everyone. The music started, and for the first few moments, it was going great. Then disaster struck. One of the bridesmaids, Amy, misstepped and twisted her ankle, falling hard onto the floor. Melissa, distracted by the fall, tripped over Amy and ended up crashing into the table holding the wedding cake. The cake toppled over, landing on Jake's younger sister, who was standing nearby. Everyone gasped. Jake rushed over to help Melissa up, but she was mortified. Amy was in pain, the cake was ruined, and Melissa's dream surprise had turned into a nightmare. To make matters worse, the wedding photographer captured the whole debacle on camera. Trying to salvage the situation, Jake took the mic and made a joke. Well, that didn't go as planned, but hey, at least we made it memorable, right? His lightheartedness helped ease the tension, and people started to laugh. They even managed to get a few good photos of everyone laughing in the midst of the mess. The rest of the night went on, albeit a bit awkward. Melissa was embarrassed, but Jake's support helped her get through. They still cringe when they talk about it, but it's one of those stories that bonds them even more. More story 6. I was at my friend John's wedding last summer. He was marrying this amazing woman, Rachel, and everyone was thrilled. The ceremony was beautiful, taking place at this old, picturesque chapel in the countryside. The reception was held in a large tent set up in a nearby field, decorated with fairy lights and rustic chic decor. Things were going great until the reception. The DJ they hired had come highly recommended, but apparently he didn't get the memo about the couple's music preferences. Instead of the curated playlist John and Rachel had painstakingly put together, the DJ started playing what can only be described as a bizarre mix of 90s Europop and heavy metal. Rachel went up to the DJ to try and get him back on track, but he was pretty adamant that he knew how to read the crowd better. As the night wore on, the music only got worse, and people started leaving the dance floor in droves. Then, during the father-daughter dance, the DJ somehow managed to play a song with explicit lyrics about heartbreak and betrayal. Rachel's dad, who was already emotional, got visibly upset, and Rachel looked like she was about to cry. John stormed over to the DJ booth, unplugged the equipment, and told the guy to leave. But it didn't end there. Without music, people tried to make the best of it by creating an impromptu sing-along. It was awkward, but endearing. That's when someone suggested they plug in a phone and play a playlist from Spotify. We all gathered around, holding up phones and using them as makeshift speakers. Surprisingly, it turned into a fun, intimate moment. People started dancing and singing along to the tunes, and the night was salvaged in the most unconventional way. John and Rachel laughed about it later, saying it was a story they'd tell for years. The DJ debacle might have been a nightmare in the moment, but it brought everyone closer together, and that's what mattered in the end. Story 7. So, There was this wedding I attended a few years back for my buddy Steve and his bride Lucy. Everything about the day was perfect. The weather, the venue, the decorations. They had chosen a gorgeous vineyard, and the ceremony was set against a backdrop of rolling hills and endless rows of grapevines. Right after the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, the photographer suggested that the bridal party take some photos near this picturesque pond on the property. The ground around the pond was a bit muddy from a recent rain, but everyone was in high spirits and didn't think much of it. As we were lining up for a group photo, one of the bridesmaids, Jenny, lost her balance and slipped into the mud. In a domino effect, two more bridesmaids and the best man, who tried to help her up, also ended up in the mud. Their outfits were completely ruined. Lucy gasped, and Steve rushed over, but then, almost as if it was choreographed, he slipped too, pulling Lucy down with him. It was like a slow-motion disaster movie. By now, everyone was laughing so hard it was impossible to be mad about the mud. The vineyard staff quickly brought towels and helped everyone get somewhat cleaned up, but the dresses and tuxes were beyond saving. Instead of panicking, Lucy decided to embrace the chaos. "Well, we're going to be dirty anyway," she said. And with that, she and Steve took the plunge into the pond, splashing water everywhere. Before long, everyone, including the guests, joined in the fun. People were jumping in the pond, splashing around, and just enjoying the moment. It turned into an impromptu water fight that no one expected but everyone loved. By the end of the night, we were all a mess. But it was the most fun wedding I've ever been to. Steve and Lucy took it in stride, laughing about how their perfect day turned into something even better. An unforgettable, muddy, and hilarious celebration of their love. Story 8. I remember this one wedding where things went sideways even before the ceremony started. My friend Sarah was marrying her college sweetheart Dan, and everything was planned down to the smallest detail. They had chosen a beautiful historic mansion as their venue, complete with a grand ballroom and lush gardens. The day started off fine until Sarah realized she had forgotten her wedding shoes at her apartment, which was about 30 minutes away. Her maid of honor, Lisa, offered to go get them, but then realized her car keys were locked and they had to call a locksmith, which delayed everything. While they were sorting out the shoe situation, Dan's groomsmen thought it would be funny to prank him by replacing his dress shoes with clown shoes. Dan, not amused but trying to keep his cool, told them to knock it off and get his real shoes. Only problem, they couldn't remember where they put them. It took nearly an hour to find them. Finally, with shoes in hand, both bride and groom were ready. The ceremony started, but as Sarah walked down the aisle, one of her heels snapped. She stumbled, catching herself before she fell completely, but it was enough to cause gasps from the guests. She laughed it off, kicked off her shoes, and walked the rest of the way barefoot. Then came the vows. Dan, nervous and flustered, accidentally recited Sarah's vows instead of his own. "I, Sarah, take you, Dan," he started, realizing his mistake halfway through. Everyone, including the officiant, burst into laughter. Sarah playfully nudged him, and he started over, this time correctly. The reception was supposed to be a formal sit-down dinner, but due to the earlier delays, the kitchen was behind schedule. Guests were getting restless and hungry. To kill time, the DJ started the dance music early, and what was meant to be background music turned into an impromptu dance party. By the time dinner was finally served, people were already having a great time on the dance floor. The rest of the night went smoothly, with lots of laughter and dancing. Despite the hiccups, or maybe because of them, Sarah and Dan's wedding was one of the most memorable and fun events I've ever attended. Story 9. I once went to a wedding where the entire event turned into a family feud. My friend Jessica was marrying her high school sweetheart, Kevin. They came from different backgrounds, and while they always got along great, their families, not so much. The tension was palpable from the start. Jessica's family, a bunch of no-nonsense folks, didn't quite mesh with Kevin's laid-back, somewhat boisterous clan, but everyone tried to keep it together, at least until the reception. During the speeches, things started to unravel. Kevin's brother Matt got up to give his best man speech. What was supposed to be a heartfelt message turned into a roast. He made fun of Kevin's childhood. It was all in good humor. But then he started taking jabs at Jessica's family. "And to think, Kev, you ended up with a family of snobs!" He laughed, clearly thinking it was all a big joke. Jessica's dad didn't take kindly to that. He stood up and instead of a toast, delivered what can only be described as a counter-roast. "At least my son isn't still living in my basement at 30, he shot back. The room fell silent, then erupted into uncomfortable laughter. What followed was a back and forth of veiled insults and not-so-veiled criticisms between the family. The final straw came when Kevin's mom, who had a few too many glasses of champagne, accused Jessica's mom of looking down on us ever since we met. Jessica, in her stunning white dress, tried to mediate. Can we all just get along for one night, please? But by then, the damage was done. Half the guests were too uncomfortable to stay, and the other half were either too drunk to care or too angry to back down. Kevin, ever the peacekeeper, took Jessica by the hand and led her outside to get some air. They ended up having their own private moment away from the chaos, and that seemed to calm things down. The night ended on a quieter note, with the couple dancing alone under the stars while their families cooled off inside. It's been a few years and Jessica and Kevin are still happily married, but family gatherings are still a bit tricky. That wedding, though, will forever be remembered as the one where the families almost went to war. Story 10. This one wedding I attended had one of the craziest twists I've ever seen. My friend Megan was marrying her fiancé Chris in a small, intimate ceremony at a charming little chapel. Everything seemed perfect. The flowers, the music, the ambiance. You could tell they put a lot of effort into making the day special. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Megan looked radiant. Chris was beaming, and everyone was in tears as they exchanged their vows. We all headed to the reception hall, ready to celebrate the newlyweds. After dinner, it was time for the toasts. The maid of honor, Megan's best friend Katie, got up to speak. She started off with the usual stories about their friendship, how Megan and Chris were perfect for each other, and all that. But then she dropped a bombshell. "There's something I've been keeping secret," Katie said, looking nervously around the room. "Chris, you might want to sit down for this." Everyone was dead silent, wondering what she was about to reveal. "A few years ago, Megan and we had a fling. It was before you two started dating, but I've always felt guilty for not telling you." You could hear a pin drop. Chris looked stunned, Megan looked mortified, and Katie just stood there, eyes welling up. For a moment, it seemed like everything was going to fall apart. But then Chris did something unexpected. He started laughing. "I know," he said, standing up. "Megan told me everything before we got engaged. It's in the past, and it doesn't change how much I..." The room let out a collective sigh of relief. Katie, still emotional, finished her toast with a heartfelt apology and well wishes for the couple. The rest of the night went on with a strange, surreal vibe. People weren't sure whether to talk about what had just happened or pretend it didn't. Megan and Chris handled it with grace, mingling with guests and dancing the night away. It's one of those stories that still gets brought up whenever anyone... It was a roller coaster of emotions, but in the end, it just proved how strong Megan and Chris's relationship really was. Story 11. So, I was at this wedding of my childhood friend Jenny. She and her fiancé Tom had planned a beautiful beach wedding, something out of a fairy tale. It was a small, intimate affair with close friends and family, and the setting was just gorgeous. White sands, blue ocean, the whole 9 yards. The ceremony was stunning. Jenny looked breathtaking in her flowing dress, and Tom couldn't take his eyes off her. They exchanged their vows under an archway of flowers, and everything seemed perfect. That is, until the reception. The reception was set up on the beach as well, under a large tent. The weather had been iffy all day, with dark clouds looming in the distance, but we were all hopeful it would hold off. The festivities were in full swing when, out of nowhere, the wind picked up. And I'm talking serious wind, not just a gentle breeze. Suddenly, the tent started to shake. People were trying to hold on to their drinks and plates as they swayed in the wind. Then, with a loud crack, one of the tent poles snapped, causing part of the tent to collapse. Guests were scrambling to get out of the way, and food and decorations went flying everywhere. Jenny and Tom were trying to stay positive, laughing it off and helping people get to safety. But the wind kept getting stronger, and it started to rain, hard. The once beautiful beach setting turned into a scene from a disaster movie. People were soaked, the cake was ruined, and the band's equipment was destroyed. In the chaos, Jenny's veil got caught in the wind and blew away. Tom, being the hero he is, chased after it, but he ended up tripping and falling face first into the sand. By the time he got up, covered in sand and soaking wet, the veil was long gone. We all ended up huddling in the nearby beach house, drenched and laughing at the absurdity of it all. Jenny and Tom, despite everything, were in good spirit. They made a toast, thanking everyone for sticking it out and making it a day they'd never... Years later, whenever we talk about that day, we all agree that it was the most memorable wedding any of us have ever attended. It might have been a disaster, but it was their disaster, and it just made their story all the more epic. Story 12. There was this wedding I attended that still makes me cringe just thinking about it. My buddy Alex was marrying his longtime girlfriend Sophie. They had this extravagant wedding planned at a beautiful country club. Everything was top-notch, from the flowers to the catering. The ceremony went off without a hitch. It was touching and heartfelt, and everyone was in tears by the end of it. But then came the reception, and that's where things took a turn for the worse. Alex's best man, Dave, was known for his wild sense of humor. During his speech, he decided to share some funny stories about Alex's past. He started with harmless anecdotes about their college days, but then he crossed the line. Dave began talking about Alex's ex-girlfriends, making jokes about their relationships, and even revealing some intimate details that should have stayed private. The room went silent, and you could feel the tension build. Sophie's face went from smiling to stone cold in seconds. "Come on, Dave, let's keep it classy." Alex tried to intervene, but Dave, already a few drinks in, just laughed it off and kept going. He then made a joke about Alex's bachelor party, implying that Alex had done things he shouldn't. Sophie stood up looking furious. "That's enough!" she shouted. Dave, finally realizing he had gone too far, mumbled an apology and sat down, but the damage was done. Sophie stormed out of the reception hall and Alex ran after her. The rest of us were left sitting there, awkwardly sipping our drinks, unsure of what to do. The mood was completely ruined. Eventually, Alex and Sophie returned, but you could tell they were both upset. They tried to salvage the night, but it was clear that the joy had been sucked out of the celebration. It's been years since that, and while Alex and Sophie are still together, they rarely bring up their wedding day. Dave, on the other hand, is no longer part of their lives. That speech was the last straw for many of their friends, and he burned a lot of bridges that night. Story 13. One wedding that stands out in my memory was my cousin Emma's. She was marrying her boyfriend, Matt, and they decided to have the wedding at this picturesque barn out in the countryside. It was a perfect fall day, with the leaves turning and a crispness in the air. Everything was going smoothly until it came time for the bouquet toss. Emma, standing on a small platform in front of the barn, turned her back to the crowd of eager single ladies. She gave the bouquet a good toss, and it soared high into the air. The women scrambled to catch it, and that's when things went sideways. The bouquet hit a hanging lantern, knocking it down. The lantern, still lit, fell into a pile of dry hay. Within seconds, the hay caught fire and the flames started spreading quickly. People started screaming and running, trying to get away from the growing blaze. Matt and his groomsmen rushed to grab fire extinguishers, but the fire was spreading too fast. Someone called 911, and we all evacuated the barn, watching helplessly as the fire grew large. The fire department arrived quickly and managed to put out the flames before the whole barn burned down, but the damage was done. The reception area was ruined, the decorations were charred, and the beautiful cake was covered in soot. Emma was in tears. Her dream wedding turned into a nightmare in a matter of minutes. Matt, ever the optimist, tried to console her, saying they could still salvage the night. The firemen, feeling bad for the couple, helped set up a makeshift reception outside. They brought out some tables and chairs that had been spared from the fire, and the caterers did their best to serve the remaining. The guests, despite the shock, rallied together to make the best of the situation. What was supposed to be a formal, elegant affair turned into an impromptu, rustic gathering under the stars. People toasted marshmallows over the remaining fire pits, shared stories, and danced to music played from someone's car stereo. It was far from what Emma had envisioned, but in a strange way it was perfect. Emma and Matt look back on their wedding day with mixed emotions, but they always say it was the most memorable night of their lives. It wasn't the wedding they planned, but it was a true testament to their love and the support of their friends and family. Story 14. I'll never forget my friend Ryan's wedding. He married his college sweetheart, Laura, and their wedding was supposed to be a classy affair at a downtown hotel. Everything was meticulously planned down to the last detail. Laura is a perfectionist, so you can imagine how much effort went into this. The ceremony went off without a hitch. The vows were beautiful, the setting was elegant, and everyone was in awe of how perfect everything looked. But then came the reception, and that's where it all went downhill. Ryan's uncle, Mike, is known for his loud and brash personality. He's the kind of guy who thinks he's hilarious, but usually he's just obnoxious. During dinner, Mike decided it would be a good idea to challenge one of Ryan's college buddies to a drinking contest. They started chugging shots of whiskey, and before long, they were both hammered. Mike, in his drunken state, thought it would be funny to get up on stage and grab the mic. He started making inappropriate jokes, not realizing his mic was hot. "Let's give a toast to Ryan's ex-girlfriends, who all dodged a bullet." The room went silent, and you could see Laura's face turning red with it. Ryan tried to get Mike off the stage, but he wasn't having it. "I'm just getting started," Mike shouted, and proceeded to tell an embarrassing story about Ryan from his college. By now, Laura was in tears, and her father looked like he was about to explode. Finally, Ryan's best man, Mark,
managed to wrestle the mic away from Mike and escort him off the stage. Damage was done. The mood was ruined, and the reception turned into a mess.
People were uncomfortable, Laura was crying, and Ryan was fuming. In an attempt to salvage the night, Mark made a heartfelt speech about Ryan and Laura's love. But it was clear that the reception was a disaster. The newlyweds ended up leaving early, and the rest of us tried to enjoy what was left of the night. Years later, Ryan and Laura still cringe when they talk about their wedding. They've managed to move past it, but Uncle Mike is no longer invited to any family gathering. It's a story they laugh about now, but it's a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, no matter how perfectly you plan. Story 15. This one wedding I went to was for my coworker, Tom. He was marrying his fiancée, Lisa, in this stunning botanical garden. The whole place was decked out in flowers, twinkling lights, and it looked like something out of a magazine. The ceremony was beautiful, and you could see the love between Tom and Lisa. Everything seemed to be going perfect. After the ceremony, we all headed to the reception area, which was set up under a large gazebo surrounded by blooming flowers. The first hint of trouble came during the toasts. Tom's best friend, Paul, got up to give his speech. He was visibly nervous, and after a few shaky sentences, he froze. I need a minute, he said, and walked off, leaving everyone in awkward silence. Tom tried to smooth things over by thanking everyone for coming, but it was clear Paul's meltdown had rattled him. Then came the meat. The caterers had prepared a fancy multi-course dinner, but halfway through, people started complaining about the food. It was undercooked, cold, and in some cases, just plain bad. Lisa's mother, who had paid for the catering, was livid. She stormed into the kitchen, yelling at the chefs. Meanwhile, guests were whispering and looking uncomfortable. To make matters worse, the DJ started playing the wrong playlist, filling the air with old 80s rock instead of the requested contemporary hits. Just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, the sky opened up and it started to rain. Not just a drizzle, but a torrential downpour. The gazebo provided some shelter, but the wind blew rain sideways, soaking the tables and guests. People were scrambling to grab their things and run for cover. Tom and Lisa, drenched and trying to stay positive, decided to move the party indoors. We all crammed into a small hall adjacent to the garden, which was not nearly big enough for all the guests. It was hot, crowded, and everyone was wet and grumpy. Despite everything, Tom and Lisa tried to make the best of it. They danced their first dance in the cramped space, with guests huddled around them. It was far from what they had planned, but in a way, it was endearing to see them so committed to enjoying their day despite all the setbacks. It's been a few years, and Tom and Lisa still joke about their wedding from hell. They say, if they could get through that day, they can get through anything. And you know what? They're probably right. Story 16. Back in college, my friend Megan invited me to her sister's wedding. Megan's sister Lily was marrying this really nice guy, Rob. They planned a beautiful ceremony at a historic. Everything about it was elegant and sophisticated. The picture perfect. Lily looked stunned. Rob's cousin, Dan, who was known for being a bit of a prankster, decided to liven things. He'd had a few too many drinks and thought it would be hilarious to swap out the wedding cake with a fake. It was an exact replica. But when you cut into it, it was filled with bright blue jello. When it came time to cut the cake, Lily and Rob had no idea. They went through the motions, smiling for the cameras, and then Lily made the first slice. Blue jello oozed out, and for a split second there was stunned silence. Then Dan burst out laughing, shouting, "Gotcha!" Lily looked mortified, and Rob was clearly... Some guests laughed, thinking it was all in good fun, but others were visibly upset. The staff quickly brought out the real cake from the kitchen, but the mood had already shifted. As if that wasn't enough, the prank set off a chain reaction. Inspired by Dan, other guests started pulling pranks of their own. Someone put whoopee cushions on the chairs, and another person switched the labels on the wine bottle. What started as a sophisticated event quickly turned into a fraud. Lily's parents were furious, and Lily herself was on the verge of tears. Rob did his best to reassure her, but it was clear she was devastated. By the end of the night, most of the guests had left, and those who stayed were either drunk or trying to console Lily. The next day, Dan tried to apologize, but the damage was done. Lily and Rob still got their beautiful wedding photos, but the reception was a different story. It's a day they'll never forget, but not for the reasons they had. Story 17. One time, I went to a wedding that seemed like it was straight out of a movie. My friend Emily was marrying her high school sweetheart, Jake. They'd planned a small, intimate ceremony at a beautiful vineyard. Everything was set up perfectly, from the flowers to the seating arrangement. The ceremony was lovely, with Emily and Jake exchanging heartfelt. As they were pronounced husband and wife, Everyone cheered, and it seemed like nothing could go wrong. Then came the reception. Emily's cousin Claire had always been a bit of a drama. She had a habit of making everything about her, but we all hoped she'd keep it together for Emily's big day. Unfortunately, that was wishful thinking. During the reception, as the speeches were being made, Claire got up unannounced. She grabbed the mic and started to give an impromptu speech. "I just want to say," she slurred, clearly tipsy, "that I'm so happy for Emily and Jake. But, I always thought I'd be the first to get married." You could feel the tension in the air. Claire rambled on about her own failed relationships and how she deserved happiness, too. Emily's face turned red with embarrassment, and Jake tried to step in, but Claire wouldn't stop. "And let's not forget," she said, pointing, "that time you kissed my boyfriend in high school. Guess we know who the real winner is." That was the final straw. Emily's dad gently escorted Claire off the stage, and the DJ quickly started playing music to divert attention, but the damage was done. Emily was in tears, and Jake was furious. The atmosphere, which had been joyful and celebratory, turned sour. Despite the drama, the night went on. People danced, trying to lighten the mood, but it was clear that Claire's outburst had cast a shadow over the evening. Emily and Jake tried to salvage what they could, but it was hard to shake off the awkwardness. To this day, whenever someone mentions that wedding, everyone cringes. Claire has since apologized, and Emily and Jake have moved on, but that night will always be remembered for the wrong reasons. Story 18. I once attended a wedding where the groom's secret almost ruined everything. My friend Ben was marrying his girlfriend, Sarah, in a quaint little church in their hometown. They had been together for years, and everyone thought they were the perfect couple. The ceremony was beautiful. Ben looked handsome in his tux, and Sarah was radiant in her dress. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but during the reception, things took a turn. Sarah's sister Lisa was the maid of honor, and she had prepared a heartfelt speech. She talked about growing up with Sarah, how Ben was like a brother to her, and how happy she was. Then she paused, looking nervous. "There's something I need to say," Lisa began, her voice shaking. "Ben, you know I love you like a brother, but there's something Sarah needs to know." The room went silent. Ben's face went pale, and Sarah looked confused. Lisa took a deep breath. "Ben, I know about you and Katie." Katie was Ben's ex-girlfriend, and apparently they had been seeing each other behind Sarah's back. Gasps filled the room, and Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Ben tried to speak, but Lisa cut him off. "Sarah deserves to know the truth," she said, before walking off the stage. Sarah ran out of the reception hall, and Ben went out. The guests were left in shock, whispering amongst themselves. It was like a scene from a soap. I followed a few others outside where we saw Sarah and Ben arguing. Ben was pleading with her, but Sarah was visibly upset. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah and Ben came back inside. Sarah, with tears streaming down her face, took the mic. "I'm sorry, everyone," she said, her voice cracked, "but I can't do this." She handed the mic to Ben and walked out, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The reception ended abruptly, with guests awkwardly making their way home. Ben tried to apologize to everyone, but it was clear that the damage was done. Sarah moved in with her sister that night, and the wedding was the talk of the town for weeks. Ben and Sarah eventually worked things out, but they decided to keep their relationship private for a while. They're still together. But that wedding day is a painful memory for everyone. Story 19. There was a wedding I went to that had the craziest string of bad luck. My friend Kevin was marrying his longtime girlfriend, Michelle. They had planned a lovely outdoor wedding at a scenic park, complete with a gazebo and fairy lights. The day started off beautifully, with clear skies and warm weather. The ceremony was perfect, with Kevin and Michelle looking like a picture-perfect couple. But just as they were saying their vows, a sudden gust of wind blew through, knocking over the floral arrangements and sending petals flying everywhere. Everyone laughed it off, thinking it was just a minor hiccup. But then, during the exchange of rings, Kevin dropped Michelle's. It bounced once, twice, and then disappeared between the wooden slats of the gazebo floor. The guests gasped, and Kevin turned bright red. The officiant tried to keep things moving, but it was clear Kevin was flustered. They finished the ceremony without the ring, planning to retrieve it later. We all moved to the reception area, hoping the rest of the day would go more smoothly. However, as dinner was being served, the power suddenly went out. Apparently, a transformer had blown, leaving us without lights or music. The caterers did their best to serve the meal in the dimming twilight, and people used their phone flashlights to see. Despite the setbacks, Kevin and Michelle tried to keep their spirits up. They decided to do the first dance without music, with guests humming the tune. It was sweet and intimate, but then, in the middle of their dance, it started to rain. Not just a light drizzle,
but a full-on downpour. Guests scrambled for cover, and Kevin and Michelle ran to the nearby pavilion. By the time everyone was under shelter, we were all soaked. The rain continued for hours, flooding the park and turning the ground to mud. The beautiful outdoor wedding was now a wet, muddy mess. In the end, Kevin and Michelle decided to call it a night. They thanked everyone for coming and promised to have a proper celebration once everything was sorted out. Despite everything, they stayed positive, laughing about how their wedding day would make for one heck of a story.
Kevin and Michelle eventually had a small gathering at their home to celebrate with close friends and family. They retrieved the lost ring and managed to laugh about the series of unfortunate events. Their wedding day may have been a disaster, but it was also a testament to their resilience and love for each other. Story 20. I attended a wedding once where the bride's father caused quite a scene. My friend Anna was marrying her fiancé Mark at this beautiful lakeside venue. The weather was perfect, the setting was stunning, and everyone was excited for the big day. The ceremony was lovely, with Anna and Mark exchanging heartfelt vows. Afterward, we moved to the reception area, which was set up under a large tent by the lake. The dinner was delicious, the speeches were touching, and everything seemed to be going smooth. Then came the father-daughter. Anna's dad, Mr. Thompson, had been drinking steadily throughout the evening. As the music started, he staggered onto the dance floor, clearly intoxicated. Anna looked a bit worried but tried to go along with it. As they danced, Mr. Thompson started to get more and more unsteady. He stumbled a few times, nearly knocking Anna over. Then in the middle of the dance, he lost his balance completely and fell, taking Anna down with him. The guests gasped and Anna looked mortified. Mark rushed over to help Anna up while Mr. Thompson just lay there laughing drunkenly. Anna's mom ran over trying to pull him to his feet, but he was too far gone. Eventually, a couple of groomsmen had to carry him off the dance floor. The mood was definitely dampened, but Anna and Mark tried to keep things going. The DJ played some upbeat music and people slowly returned to the dance, but the incident had left a mark, and you could tell Anna was upset. Later in the evening, as the party was winding down, Mr. Thompson managed to stumble back into the tent, still drunk. He grabbed the mic from the DJ and started to slur out an apology, but it was barely coherent. Mark's brother gently took the mic from him and escorted him out again. Despite the drama, Anna and Mark stayed positive. They danced the night away with their friends and family, trying to make the best of the situation. It was a night none of us would forget, for better or worse. Anna and Mark have since moved on from that, but whenever we talk about their wedding, the story of Mr. Thompson's drunken antics always comes up. It was a rough start, but their marriage has been rock solid, and they've learned to laugh about the chaos that marked their big day. Story 21. This one time, my friend Jason was getting married to his fiancée, Olivia, in this beautiful old church in the heart of the city. Everything was meticulously planned, right down to the last detail. Olivia had spent months ensuring every flower, every decoration was perfect. The ceremony was going off without a hitch until it was time for the ring exchange. Jason's best man, Mike, fumbled with the ring box and, to everyone's horror, dropped. The tiny ring bounced off the wooden floor and rolled right into an old, unused heating vent. You could hear a pin drop as everyone realized what had happened. Olivia gasped, and Jason turned pale. Mike, mortified, started trying to pry open the vent with his fingers, but it wouldn't budge. A few groomsmen jumped in to help, but it was clear that without tools, the ring was stuck. Jason tried to keep calm, saying, "We can figure this out later, let's just continue." They decided to use Olivia's ring for the ceremony and deal with the missing one afterward. The rest of the ceremony was a bit tense, but they made it through. Afterward, while the guests moved to the reception hall, Jason, Mike, and a few others stayed behind to try and retrieve the ring. Using a combination of a coat hanger and a bit of ingenuity, they managed to fish the ring out of the vent just as the reception was about to start. Jason was relieved, but the stress of the situation had left everyone a bit on edge. The reception began, and things seemed to be getting back on track. The food was excellent, the music was great, and people were starting to relax. Then, during the first dance, the DJ's equipment malfunctioned. The music cut out completely, and there was an awkward silence. Thinking quickly, one of Olivia's friends pulled out a portable speaker from her bag and connected it to her phone. They played a song from a wedding playlist she had saved, and Jason and Olivia continued their dance. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The rest of the night went on without any more major incidents, but it was clear that Jason and Olivia's wedding day had not gone as planned. Despite the hiccups, they handled everything with grace and humor. In the end, the night was saved by quick thinking and the support of their friends and family. Jason and Olivia laugh about it now, saying that if they could get through their wedding day, they could get through anything. It's a story they'll tell for years to come,
reminding them of the unexpected moments that made their day truly unique. Story 22. My cousin Tom had a wedding that was memorable for all the wrong reasons. He was marrying his fiancée, Jenny, in this gorgeous vineyard. Everything was set to be a picturesque event, and the weather was perfect. The ceremony went smoothly, with heartfelt vows and not a dry eye in the house. But as we transitioned to the reception, things started to go awry. The vineyard was known for its wine, and they had set up a tasting table for guests to sample different varieties. Unfortunately, some of the guests took this as an invitation to get absolutely plastered. One of Tom's uncles, who was known for his love of a good drink, decided to make it his mission to sample every single one. By the time dinner was served, he was thoroughly drunk. During the speeches, he stood up uninvited and started to give a slurred, incoherent toast. "Here's to, what's her name? Jenny and Tom. May you both, always find your way home." Tom tried to laugh it off and gently guided his uncle back to his seat. But the real trouble started when the uncle decided to join the live band. He grabbed a tambourine and started banging it wildly out of sync with the music. The band, professionals to the core, tried to play on, but it was clear the uncle was ruining their rhythm. The final straw came when the uncle, in his drunken enthusiasm, tripped over a speaker and knocked over the entire sound system. The music stopped abruptly, and the guests were left in stunned silence. Tom and Jenny looked mortified. The vineyard staff quickly stepped in to help, and the band managed to get their equipment back up and running. Meanwhile, Tom's father and a few groomsmen escorted the uncle away from the reception area to sober up. Despite the chaos, Tom and Jenny tried to salvage the night. They danced, mingled with guests, and did their best to enjoy their special. The incident with the uncle became a running joke for the rest of the evening, and by the end of the night, everyone was laughing about. Tom and Jenny's wedding was certainly one for the books. It wasn't the smooth, elegant affair they had planned, but it was a night filled with laughter and unexpected moments that brought everyone closer together. They say it's a reminder that sometimes the best memories come from the most unexpected events. Story 23. My buddy Jake's wedding was one of those events where Murphy's Law seemed to be in full effect. Jake and his fiancée, Laura, had planned a beautiful garden wedding at a local. The day started off perfectly, with clear skies and a gentle breeze. The ceremony was lovely, but during the exchange of vows, a bee decided to join the festivity. It buzzed around Laura's bouquet, causing her to flinch and Jake to swat at it. The bee, seemingly angered, then decided to sting the officiant right on the nose. The poor man yelped and tried to continue, but his nose started swelling up. Trying to move past the incident, they finished the ceremony and moved on to the reception. The garden was beautifully decorated, and the catering looked delicious. But as the guests started to dig into their meals, someone noticed that there were ants crawling all over the dessert table. It turned out that the sweets had attracted a colony, and they were making themselves at home among the pastries and cakes. The staff quickly cleared the table and tried to salvage what they could. The sight of ants had already put some people off their appetite. Jake and Laura tried to keep the mood light, making jokes about the uninvited guests. Then came the dancing. Jake and Laura took to the floor for their first dance, and as they twirled, Laura's heel got caught in the hem of her dress. She stumbled, and Jake, trying to catch her, ended up stepping on. Laura yelped in pain, and they both went down in a heap. The guests gasped, but Jake and Laura, ever the good sports, got up laughing and took a bow. The night continued with a series of small mishaps. The DJ played the wrong song for the father-daughter dance. The bar ran out of beer way too early, and someone's kid knocked over a decorative fountain, soaking a group of guests. Despite all the setbacks, Jake and Laura never lost their sense of humor. They took each mishap in stride, laughing and joking with their guests. By the end of the night, everyone was sharing stories of the day's events, and it felt like one big. Jake and Laura often say that their wedding was a perfect reflection of their relationship. Imperfect, full of surprises, but filled with love and laughter. It might not have been the flawless day they envisioned, but it was a day that brought everyone closer together and gave them stories to tell for years to come. Story 24. The wedding of my friend Lisa and her fiancé Chris was one of the most unexpected events I've ever attended. They decided to have a rustic barn wedding, which was very much in style and absolutely beautiful. The barn was decorated with fairy lights, flowers, and vintage decor. The ceremony was held outside, with the barn serving as a backdrop. It was a gorgeous day, sunny and warm. Lisa looked stunning in her dress, and Chris couldn't take his eyes off. As they exchanged vows, a flock of birds suddenly flew overhead. It was picturesque until one of the birds decided to relieve itself right on Chris's shoulder. Everyone tried to hold in their laughter as Chris's best man, Adam, quickly handed him a handkerchief. Chris, ever the good sport, wiped off his shoulder and smiled, saying, "Guess we'll have a story to tell our kids." The ceremony continued without further incident. The reception was held inside the barn, and it looked like something out of a magazine. However, as the night went on, things started to get a bit wild. The open bar was a hit, maybe too much of a hit. Guests were enjoying themselves, and the dance floor was packed. During one particularly energetic song, Lisa's uncle, who was a bit tipsy, decided to show off his dance move. He attempted a breakdance spin, lost his balance, and crashed into the dessert table. The beautiful tiered cake toppled over, landing on a few unsuspecting guests. Chaos ensued as people tried to clean up the mess and make sure everyone was okay. Lisa was in shock, but Chris, laughing, said, "It's not a party until someone ends up covered in cake." His lightheartedness helped diffuse the situation, and soon everyone was laughing and enjoying the impromptu food fight. Then, as if things couldn't get any crazier, a small fire broke out near the bar. Apparently, a guest had knocked over a candle, setting some decorations ablaze. The staff quickly jumped into action, extinguishing the fire before it could spread. The smell of smoke lingered, but thankfully no one was hurt. Despite all the mishaps, Lisa and Chris managed to have a great time. They danced, laughed, and celebrated with their friends and family. The night was far from perfect, but it was certainly memorable. Lisa and Chris look back on their wedding day with a mix of horror and fondness. It was a day full of unexpected moments and laughter, a true testament to their ability to roll with the punches. They say it wasn't the wedding they planned, but it was perfect in its own crazy way. Story 25. One of the most unforgettable weddings I attended was for my friend Paul and his fiancée Rachel. They had planned a beautiful beach wedding, complete with a sunset ceremony and a reception under the stars. The ceremony was stunning, with the sun setting over the ocean as Paul and Rachel exchanged vows. Everything seemed perfect until it was time for the reception. The DJ had set up on the beach, and the dance floor was right on the sand. As the night went on, the tide started to come. At first, it was just a few small waves lapping at the edges of the dance. But as the night progressed, the waves grew larger and began to encroach on. Guests were dancing and having a great time, oblivious to the rising water. Paul and Rachel were in the middle of their first dance when a particularly large wave crashed onto the beach, soaking everyone's feet. There was a moment of stunned silence before everyone burst out laughing. Paul and Rachel, ever the good sports, kicked off their shoes and continued dancing in the wet sand. The guests followed suit, and soon everyone was dancing barefoot, splashing in the water. The DJ, worried about his equipment, moved it to higher ground, and the party continued with a mix of beach music and laughter. The caterers set up a makeshift buffet on the dry part of the beach, and people ate with their toes in the sand. As the night went on, the tide continued to rise and the waves got bigger. Guests were jumping over waves, taking selfies in the surf, and having a blast. It was like a beach party gone wild. By the end of the night, everyone was soaked but happy. Paul and Rachel had embraced the chaos and turned it into one of the most fun and unique weddings any of us had ever attended. They even took a dip in the ocean in their wedding attire, laughing and splashing like kids. Paul and Rachel's wedding is still talked about among our friends. It was a day full of surprises and spontaneity, a perfect reflection of their adventurous spirits. They proved that sometimes the best moments are the ones you never see coming.